that Skylar and I have been in each other's lives at different intersections. And I've known Skylar for lots of iterations between not only ourselves, but of each other. And it has just been really beautiful to see Skylar become this incredible registered dietitian. She has helped me really forge a beautiful relationship with food. And I've seen her do that the same with patients in my previous private practice and with our clients at Rev Health. So with that introduction, Skylar, please tell more about your glowing self.
Gosh, that is so kind. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to be here and especially to be talking about this topic, which is really near and dear to my heart, which I'll share a little bit about in the beginning of the presentation when we get to the next slide. But yeah, I'm a registered dietitian. As we kind of alluded to, and maybe my background shows, I'm in Colorado. So I'm not in the Boston area, but it's wonderful that I get to still collaborate with these wonderful ladies at Rev Health on all things nutrition, and just excited to see what comes of everything, and grateful to be able to talk about this topic. I find it such a privilege to be a registered dietitian. I wasn't always a registered dietitian. I used to be an engineer. So it's really fun and awesome to be here. And I can't wait to see what discussions come up tonight.
Oh, amazing.
We can start with your story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sharing this picture for many reasons, but most importantly, because when I look at this picture, this is a picture of me at my sister's wedding. I was the maid of honor. This was back in like 2020, so kind of a tumultuous time with the pandemic and all of that. And, weddings are supposed to be this wonderful time of celebration. Maybe, you get to see family members that you haven't seen in a while. Like it's this really beautiful coming together to celebrate love. And so it should just be this really beautiful memory. And while it is for me for so many reasons, and like I really cherish that time that I had at my sister's wedding, I also look at this picture and I just want to send so much like compassion, love, empathy to that version of myself, because this was a time when I was very much struggling with my relationship with food and I didn't even really know it. At the time, I had undiagnosed chronic Lyme disease. So I was dealing with a whole host of symptoms that I had no control over. They were very unpredictable. So on this day of the wedding, I was so worried about like how I was going to feel. Would I be able to give that maid of honor speech and all of these like what ifs? And during this time, because I had so little control over my symptoms and my health, I turned to food to control, which is a very common occurrence, sometimes, especially in the chronic illness world. A lot of like my relationship with food at the time was rooted in fear. And it kind of led me honestly to this state of almost like somewhat clinical malnutrition because I was just so overly controlling whatever I was putting into my body. It was not a helpful or a healthy relationship whatsoever when at the time I thought I was being healthy with my food. So this is why, as a registered dietitian now, who works with many clients who, whether they're experiencing some sort of chronic illness or maybe they're just dealing with whatever it is that Maddie comes up with on her lab work in one of the protocols she puts you on, I will always address what is your relationship with food. It's the foundation, it's where I start. And then we can progress further up the chain on really establishing like what is the version of the most nutrient dense optimal diet for you. But it always needs to start with what is our relationship with food. So that is my why. So you can switch. So knowing that, and I think we can all kind of relate to this topic around how do we feel around food with the holidays. So the holidays can be this really overwhelming time for us for many reasons, whether it's we have so many social obligations, so many more than what we're used to, so we just feel a little drained by that. Or maybe we're around family members or friends who feel a little bit more triggering than usual. Whatever it is, it can be really overwhelming. So I want everyone to think about your experience of food during the holidays. kind of think about like what words come to mind to describe how you feel, whether it's at a certain event or with food in general, like what words come to mind? Do you have tendencies to not be super mindful with the food that you're around? And I'm happy to open it up to the attendees to share, or we can kind of just think about it. Um, I'll leave it up to you if anyone is feeling open to sharing. This is a safe space.
I am feeling open to sharing, Skylar. When I think about, I remember when I had a relationship with food that was much like what you described, being at your sister's wedding, just feeling really controlled and really confused. And I know you talk a lot about this too, labeling some foods as good and some foods as bad. Like the holidays they would be so stressful, and I feel like I would control it so much until the point where I would lose complete control. Like the pendulum would swing from one extreme end to the other.
Mhm.
So I think most of my life feels like the holidays in that experience. I would say the more recent holiday experience in the last like 4 years have felt, I'm so happy to say, more similar to like any other day. That it feels really like at peace, and maybe not like as eventful. It feels more like middle of the road.
Mm. Such a beautiful place to be in.
Totally.
I love that. And also, I'm fully in my pajamas right now, so like, that's okay.
We love it.
So if you're like, oh my gosh. But I feel like the holidays are for me traditionally more joyful than not, which is great. But I feel like just being trapped in like a room or a couple of rooms and like you just have food everywhere is definitely, as I'm really excited to have this conversation, just be more mindful and empowered with things for myself going into the holidays, because I feel like I don't think about it, and then I see my family and I'm so excited, and there's drinks and there's so like food everywhere, and you just kind of lose track, and then at the end of it you're just like heaved over and like so tired and so full, and you're like, what just happened? And like a time warp went by. So I feel like that's kind of my experience. And I feel like the words I would choose are excess and a little uncontrollable.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm definitely excited to hear from you today, and thank you so much, Rev, for putting this on.
Uh-huh. Wow, thank you so much for sharing both of your experiences. I mean, I think so many women, and I mean anyone, honestly, and of any gender can relate to these feelings of just like excess, I think was that word you used, that very much feels like the holidays in general, like everything just kind of feels extra. So yeah, we will definitely share some strategies and tidbits throughout this whole presentation to make you feel a little bit more empowered. So
I'm
that brings
here.
us to mindful eating. So mindful eating, it's really just this concept of getting really present with the food in front of you and bringing this like intention behind it. So when I think about mindful eating and whenever I guide my clients through mindful eating practices, it starts with these practices of grounding yourself. So really, like when we think of grounding ourselves, we're thinking of like staying present in one place is like how I see grounding myself. And so how to do that with food is it takes practice. So this doesn't come naturally all the time. It does. We have to build the habit. But you can start by really rating your hunger fullness level before an event. So Kayla, like how you shared, you walk into a room and there's just all this food everywhere. And it can be just, we can get carried away sort of thing. And then you're like, I walk away from the evening and I'm so excessively full and uncomfortable. So what can be really helpful is before you even walk into that room, check in with yourself, do a quick body scan, understand like, where am I at? Am I actually that hungry as I'm walking into this room, or am I starving and ravenous? Do I need to have a protein-rich snack or something, which we'll get further into that later in the conversation, but really just doing these body scan exercises. And then even something as simple as like naming the smells, the sights you see, the textures, really just kind of dropping in to the situation instead of being so like dissociated from it. And you can do this out loud with someone, or if you feel comfortable with that, or you can do it in your head, even kind of do like this mental checklist of like, okay, I'm smelling some of my favorite gingerbread cookies or whatever it is. Wow, they look so crunchy. Like just kind of naming things can really drop us into the present moment. And then another effective strategy I will always tell my clients to do at any time they're at some sort of a event that requires, or not requires, but involves like finger food or things that you grab that are easy to kind of just like, okay, I'm going to grab a little bit of this, a little bit of that, is to practice plating your food so that your brain is able to actually visualize what it's digesting. So this is really drawing that connection with your food and your body. So by doing that, you're allowing your brain to understand like, okay, I have some veggies here, I have some carbohydrates here, some protein here, like, okay, maybe I need some healthy fats, whatever it is, or oh my gosh, my entire plate's full of carbohydrates, like this maybe isn't going to feel good later. Maybe I should add some of the sliced cheese or whatever it is that offers you with a little bit of protein. So really just plating your food is a simple practice to engage in more mindful eating techniques. And then this last one's probably one of my favorites, and it's setting an intention. Go in with a plan. Really reflect on how you want to feel after you leave the evening. So, when we go in with a plan, we do bring this sense of empowerment and control. So if we know, for instance, that we love pumpkin pie, and you're like, oh, I last year I like lost control of the pumpkin pie because I saved up all of my calories all day long and I had way too much pumpkin pie and I felt really sick, sort of thing. So instead, can you go in with a plan and say, like, I'm going to nourish myself all day long before, like, in a really kind, loving way before this event. I'm not going to do the whole save up calories experience. And I'm going to allow myself to have a slice of pumpkin pie because this isn't something that we do on a regular basis. I mean, if you're having pie every day, like that's another issue that we need to talk about. But it's a seasonal holiday treat. And you should fully allow yourself to have full permission to enjoy that slice of pumpkin pie. So really just the key here is like reflect on how you want to feel. Which brings me to the next topic of blood sugar. So blood sugar is definitely, it's a popular hot topic, but it is that way for good reason, because blood sugar it really plays an integral effect on various body systems and organs in our body, and especially the nervous system. So when we think of the nervous system, we think of, this is how we can manage our mood, anxiety, like kind of those more triggering type feelings. And our blood sugar swings can actually manifest in the nervous system in several different ways. So cognitively, so within our brain, we might feel that we have difficulty concentrating. We might feel like we're not very good at making decisions in the moment. Or maybe we're experiencing like a slower processing speed and slower thinking patterns. Emotionally, we might feel really irritable, kind of touchy. We might feel like our mood is swinging a lot more than it usually does. We might feel really anxious, maybe kind of low and depressed, maybe even like angry, that hangry feeling that a lot of people can feel when their blood sugar is doing a crazy erratic pattern. And then physically, even, you can start to feel a little headachy. That's a common one I hear when someone's experiencing blood sugar dysregulation, but even things like sweating, dizziness, shaking, you're just not feeling strong in your body. And so what I mean by blood sugar swing is in this little diagram here, it's really that maroon line that's showing a really drastic blood sugar pattern where you're experiencing these spikes followed by crashes. And it's usually once you have that spike and a crash, it's going to be a repetitive pattern. Ideally, we want to be within that green zone, so just a more well-controlled blood sugar pattern. So how do we do that? How do we achieve that ideal pattern of blood sugar? So when I talk about blood sugar with my clients, I really like them to understand like how food actually breaks down into the body. So that way we can bring more intention to it. So when we think about building a balanced plate or a meal, it should include the following. It should have protein, it should have fat, it should have fiber, and then it should have some sort of leafy green or vegetable like deepened color. It doesn't necessarily have to be green. So let's start with protein. Oh, go ahead.
Should I go here? Nope.
Oh, no, sorry. Yes, you can stay on this side. I'm just going to go through a little spiel about the different food groups because I do think it's important to understand, especially this time of year. So
also, I'd like to just not to interrupt you, but I definitely had a spike and a crash today.
yes, I'm sure you did. The stress.
It did happen. But then also not eat, I didn't eat for like from 7 a.m. to what time was it, Maddie? 5:30.
No, that'll do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about what that probably felt like
during the holidays.
Yeah.
Let's not do that.
So when we think about protein, so that's one of the main macronutrients. It breaks down into something called amino acids into our bodies. And yes, those can be stored in our liver and eventually broken down into glucose via a process called gluconeogenesis. I will stop with all the scientific terms, but they don't readily want to break down into glucose or blood sugar. So it's not going to cause this major surge in blood sugar. Like when you ingest protein, you're gonna exist more in that green area. If anything, ingesting protein, it's gonna make us feel calm. It's gonna make us feel relaxed. It's gonna make us feel satiated. So really, like, let's think about protein breaking down into these amino acids and not breaking down into blood sugar or glucose to lead to these spikes or crashes. It has a pretty negligible effect in our body. And then fat. So these are foods like talking healthy fats here, like avocado, egg yolks, olive oil. Those break down into what's called fatty acids. And these fatty acids also don't have an effect on our blood sugar. These fatty acids, they actually slow down our digestion of the meal, which contributes to this feeling of fullness. So that's why we say, like, include fats with your plate. You're going to feel more satiated. You're going to feel more full. And then we have fiber. So fiber includes really all of those fiber-rich, non-starchy vegetables and fruits and whole grains that are loaded with these fibrous foods. You can think of these fiber-rich foods, they're wrapped up, or they basically wrap up sugar and starch. So you have to like chew through the fiber to release a small amount of blood sugar into your bloodstream. So it takes like a lot of effort to release the blood sugar from these carbohydrate or fiber-rich foods. So really think of it as like nature's providing us with this incredible package of whole foods that are gifting us with this sugar and starch to support our blood sugar in a way that is a lot more natural for our body. It's like this slow drip of energy. So a complex carbohydrate, meaning it contains fiber, or any fiber-rich food, it also isn't going to lead to this dramatic blood sugar spike or crash. Those foods are also loaded with things like antioxidants, polyphenols, vitamins, minerals, all these things that help us fight our inflammation, oxidative stress. So really making sure that when we're having meals, like a balanced, structured meal, it contains those proteins, those fats, those fibers, and that's it. Okay, sorry. I was like, it was
a colorful food.
And the colorful food. Yes, the fiber is the colorful food too. So yeah, I mean, I think just kind of getting in the practice of understanding like, okay, I'm eating some mashed potatoes. Those maybe like coming from a white potato, they don't contain as much fiber in them as if I were to be eating like a sweet potato even has a slightly more fiber. It has a little bit lower of a glycemic index, so it might not contribute as much to a blood sugar response. I'm not saying that potatoes are something to be feared or something to not include, but let's think about how we can structure our meal to better support this blood sugar response. So if we know that mashed potatoes don't have a lot of fiber in them, they're mainly starch, what can we pair alongside them to help improve that blood sugar response? We can pair it with protein, we can pair it with healthy fats, and a little more fiber source. So really, when you think about like the Thanksgiving meal itself, it can be really balanced. You can plate your turkey or your chicken or whatever your family chooses to use as the main entree, or if you're vegetarian, whatever vegetarian protein option that you're using, you can still have the potatoes. That's going to be like your carbohydrate source. Can you add like whatever vegetable side that's served? Can you be the one to bring the salad to the party? So everyone has like a more colorful, fiber rich option to include there. So that kind of like takes care of those two first actions on the side here. And then that brings me to the let's not skip our meals to save up calories. So what a lot of really disastrous things can happen when we skip entire meals. Our body loves structure. It loves being able to understand when it's going to receive a meal, and that has to do with our circadian rhythm. We like routine. And so when we have this mentality that, okay, I'm going to wait all day long to eat because I know this, I'm going to have this massive dinner at 4 p.m., it will backfire. You will either feel not great during the day, which is going to leak into your nervous system. You're going to be experiencing more of these cognitive, emotional, physical manifestations of these erratic blood sugar swings. You're also going to feel really like your biological drive to eat is going to take over when you're in front of that meal that has likely highly palatable foods in front of it, whether they're more like rich or salty, sweets, things like that. So really trying to avoid this mentality of I'm going to skip my meal. And then of course, incorporating regular stress and incorporating regular exercise and managing our stress are really important. Stress can absolutely trigger these erratic blood sugar swings because of the good old hormone cortisol. So if we allow cortisol to take over the show, then we're kind of allowing these erratic blood sugar spikes to come into play. And exercise, it can just be this wonderful mechanism to help kind of level out our blood sugar. So even, taking a 10-minute walk after Thanksgiving dinner or going around the block with the family, it's going to help everyone's digestion. It's going to help everyone's blood sugar response. They will thank you for it. So going to the next slide. This is some more talk on blood sugar, but this is more focused on the low blood sugar. So we often hear about like elevated blood sugar and how bad that is. But let's talk about low blood sugar for a moment here. So when we talked about this on the previous set too, okay, we skip a meal, we're going to save up all of our calories for that 4 p.m. dinner. So this restrictive food behavior, it can trigger our sympathetic nervous system, which is also known as our fight or flight response. So really low blood sugar can trigger this like sympathetic activation or this overdrive, and it can cause our parasympathetic nervous system, which is that calm, rest, and digest state we want to be in most of the time, to kind of take the back seat. So a lot of different organ systems of the body take a hit when our low blood sugar or when our blood sugar drops. And this really does not have great effects on our metabolic health. So your adrenal glands, which sit above your kidneys, those are going to pump out adrenaline in response to this low blood sugar. They're saying, okay, we need some fuel. You're not giving it to me, so I'm going to create fuel myself. So they pump out adrenaline. This causes some insulin suppression in your pancreas because your body actually wants more blood sugar in its body, and insulin is what drives down blood sugar. Your liver starts releasing stored versions of glucose So it goes into overdrive and starts producing glucose from stored glycogen, as well as from options like our protein stores, so our amino acids, which isn't optimal. We might start producing glucose from fatty acids, which again is like it's a more stressful process for the body. And then even our kidneys start to kind of upregulate a transporter called SGLT2, which makes our body hold on to more blood sugar. So it's just this, like, you may think that you're doing yourself a service by restricting your food all day, but really you're just telling your body to like turn on all these processes that are not, it's more of a starvation response. And it's not an optimal steady state to be in. It's really abrasive for the body. It's really abrasive for your hormone systems, your endocrine system, all of these things that we really need to care about.
I think, Skylar, I think this is so fascinating also because we don't usually connect the dots between, first of all, a stressful holiday season. Even though we enjoy our time with our family, sometimes it can be stressful and, you know, a lot of work, and maybe we're preparing for people to come over and we've got, you know, days upon days of cooking, and then you're not eating all day. And having emotional responses because your entire body is having all of this is happening all at once, which is going to affect the way that we react emotionally. And then if we're triggered by food, we're going to grab more, you know, some unhealthy food, or, you know, something like, I don't know, sugar, high sugar pies, which in and of itself aren't bad, but you can kind of see this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense now. A lot of holidays are making sense to me, right?
Yeah, you'll probably really resonate with the graphic on the next slide,
Yeah,
actually.
vicious cycle.
Yes. So this whole that whole thing you just shared, Julie, honestly, it's really correlated to this like diet related behavior or extreme approach cycle that can backfire on us. So, and this really, it has nothing to do with our willpower or who we are as a person. It really has to do with our physiology and our biology. And so I share these things because the more you understand that, the more you can empower yourself to be like, well, I know how to remedy this then. So, starting at the top of the cycle, you have this diet related behavior that you engage in. Maybe it's intermittent fasting, which we love to, you know, try to avoid at Rev Health. But so you're engaging in this diet related behavior. Maybe you find that you have this short-term success with it. You're like, all right, I'm feeling like pretty good. Maybe your body's operating off of ketone bodies, like you're pumping, like all of these things behind the scenes are happening. Maybe you feel like you're losing a little bit of weight or whatever it was that your goal was behind engaging in this diet-related behavior. And then eventually your body starts to register what's happening. And it's starting to feel deprived. It's starting to feel biologically deprived and like something's wrong, either that you are really sick and or that it's like a famine and you're not able to access food. And so it starts to adjust things accordingly. So it's going to downregulate some processes in your body and upregulate others, which can lead to these sort of like intense food cravings, this potential like unintentional or overeating, these binge related behaviors. And this is usually when we're surrounded by foods that either are really highly palatable, meaning like they're higher in sugar, higher in salt, their textures are like crunchier, whatever it is that you personally crave. So you kind of lose control over it. And it's not you losing control, it's your biology actually working for you to keep you alive and safe. But then you perceive it as, oh my gosh, I'm doing something terrible again. Like, look at me, I'm being such a pig, or I'm overeating, or whatever it is, these thoughts that come to your mind. So you develop this feeling of shame, this guilt, this maybe body dissatisfaction. So you go right back to where you started and you're like, I need to shut this down. I need to restrict again. I need to get my ducks in a row and I need to not engage in these like overeating behaviors. So you enter the cycle all over again and you try another diet related behavior or whatever it is. So that's why we at Rev and me, every time I work with clients, I am always trying to back away from any sort of extreme approach that someone has engaged in previously. And it's okay if you have, like, we've all been there. And it's just about, having compassion with yourself and exploring, like, why did I engage in that behavior? Like, what is my ultimate goal here? And moving forward with a more suitable, sustainable plan for you.
Skylar, I just have to say that I love that you just walked us through this example because, and as you know, we have such a similar philosophy, that there's always a reason that your body is working in favor for you. I love to say, like, the body's never wrong. So if there's like a symptom you're experiencing, but I love this nutrition specific view of your cravings have a reason, your physiology has a reason, like your body always has your back. So how can we better understand what's happening? So I love how beautifully you outlined that, because I think it really helps people feel less shame. And food is such an emotional topic, as you know, that if people can show themselves compassion in that way, it's really, really helpful and beautiful for people.
Yeah. 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 That's such a good connection there.
So good.
So yeah, we can move to the next slide. So that brings me to making peace with all our food. So, when we have come from this place of maybe being more comfortable or used to using these extreme approaches, this concept of food and body neutrality can feel really uncomfortable for many people. They're like, well, what do you mean that I can start including these other foods that I have like restricted for so long or straight up labeled as really bad? And the more that we can acknowledge that food doesn't have morality, so eating a certain food doesn't make you a good or bad person is really what I mean by that. The more we can approach food as food, and we can view something like pumpkin pie as food. We can view something like a kale salad as food. And we're not like necessarily comparing pumpkin pie to kale salad. What I more like to drill into is that kale salad offers us very different nutrients and experiences than pumpkin pie. So really we can't compare them on the same like nutrition level necessarily, but we can both, or we can say that they are both food. Like they are both food. And so the less that we say something is like, oh my gosh, I'm so bad, I am gonna have pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving or whatever it is, and kind of shame ourselves for that behavior, the more we're able to just coexist with food and actually have more power over it rather than the other way around of the food having more power over us. That's not a fun place to be in when the food has more power over us. We don't want to be in that space. And so really we do have to work on understanding like, well, what are the food rules that I've developed in my life over my lifetime, honestly, that have led to these more like restrictive rules that I've created for myself. And I tell myself like, I must eat this and I shouldn't have that, or I can't have this, really like using these words of like shouldn't, can't, must, like they feel really strong and abrasive and like all or nothing kind of thing. So if we can eliminate any of these like restrictive patterns that we've created for ourselves, the more we're going to be able to have peace with all the foods. And especially during this holiday season, the more we can just give ourselves unconditional permission to enjoy your favorite holiday dishes, the less like shameful or guilty or like really like, oh, I'm doing something bad, I'm being rebellious, like my diet starts again on Monday sort of mentality. Like the more, like Maddie shared at the beginning, you can just feel really at ease and at peace around the dinner table and just be like, I'm here with all my loved ones. Like maybe there's some people here who like drive me nuts, but like I'm here and I'm really enjoying this time. And the food is just another element to it. It is not the main event. It's not like it can be a really like common thread among the holidays and a really like beautiful, nourishing, nurturing process. But the main event should also be centered around connecting with those around you. And so if we're able to experience like less of this food fear or this good versus bad mentality, then the more we're able to be really neutral and present with ourselves. Which brings me to the next and final slide of the discussion, boundaries. So I have a friend who's a therapist who shared this quote with me of boundaries extend the relationship. And I have never forgotten this. At first, when she said, I was like, wait, what? Like boundaries? That feels like, how is this extending any relationship? Like, aren't we cutting things out when we're developing boundaries? But when you really think about it, like by setting boundaries, either with loved ones or other people in your life or yourself, you're allowing that relationship to exist in a more healthy way, which is going to extend that relationship. So I urge all of you during this holiday season to practice some of these boundary setting techniques. Can you communicate openly with your loved ones, or whoever that you're spending time with, who might be like really digging into themselves, saying like really shameful things about like their own relationship with food and their body? And it feels maybe triggering to you as someone who's like new to welcoming this into their life. Can you communicate to them and say, and definitely use I, so it feels less accusatory and all those things, but can you say like, I've really been working on developing a more positive relationship with food, and sometimes this talk, it just doesn't feel really good to me. So can we change the subject? Like, do you mind, sort of thing? Like, you can make it really polite and peaceful. But that's like one tactic I usually use, especially as a dietitian at holiday events. I usually get asked a lot about food and diets and things that I'm like, you know what? I'm not on the clock right now. I don't want to do this right now. So I'll usually have to exercise these boundaries a lot as well. You can also politely remove yourself. You can say like, if someone's just not getting the hint or it just feels really not good, you can say like, I'm gonna go grab a drink. I'll be right back, or whatever it is. Like, you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to make it a big deal. Just, kind of protecting yourself, honestly. And then this is more of a boundary for yourself, but can we use positive language? So this kind of goes back to removing those words of like, I shouldn't, I can't, I must, these like really like black and white terminologies. Instead, can we like talk about food within ourselves in our own brain in just a more peaceful, neutral tone? So saying something like, I'm going to allow myself to have that piece of pumpkin pie because I think it's delicious and it's not something I get year round and I really want to enjoy it. I'm going to allow myself to savor the moment and really taste it, really feel the textures in my mouth, like just really get present with it. And I guarantee you, you are going to enjoy that pumpkin pie so much more and actually feel really satiated just having the one slice and probably not want multiple slices. And if you do reach for another slice, it is not the end of the world. Again, it just goes back to reflecting on how you want to feel in the experience. And then lastly, I will conclude by just saying, really practice unconditional acceptance during this time. Recognize that nutrition, it's about consistency. It's not about perfection. It's about the little things we do every day that matter and that build up. It's this brick by brick mentality. It's not, you had one bad meal and now your life is over and you undid all this hard work. Like, no, no, no. It's an everyday thing. It's practicing this ability to accept yourself when you're doing great and when you're maybe not doing so great. So, yeah, just kind of have fun with practicing these boundaries and using some of these mindful eating techniques. And I hope now that you understand like how food is broken down into your body and that diet related extreme cycle approach, you just feel a little bit more empowered this holiday season.
I do feel empowered, Skylar.
Oh, good.
And I think we'll do a little bit of a Q&A if anyone has any questions. I definitely have a question for you, Skylar.
Mhm.
I feel like this mentality is common and I sometimes go here as well. So I am interested in your response. Sometimes I find that with holidays in particular, or like kind of in general, there's sort of this like this mentality of underlying, well, I deserve it. I
Mm.
deserve to kind of go there and to like, you know, eat and it can, when it's sort of more in like the extreme, like I deserve it. Like gonna have like 4 pieces of pie today. It's the holidays. Come on, I've been so stressed out. It's one more thing to worry about. I don't want to have to stress about this. Where we kind of go into that like deserving
Mm.
mentality. What is something that you can do to kind of navigate that voice that's telling you maybe not practicing the most like healthful eating is something that like we are deserving of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. This is a very common rhetoric in like I call it like the diet culture world, where it's like earn your food um
Mhm.
kind of mentality. And that seems kind of like what you're sharing, where it's like, okay, I don't have dessert very often. It's the holidays, so like I earned this right to overly indulge in whatever it is that's in front of me or that you want to overly indulge in. And this kind of goes back to what are the like food rules that you've put in place even like before the holidays, and like why have you created this mentality around something like dessert? Like where does that come from? It's sort of like, and I always think this way, and I know you do too, this like root cause mentality of like, well, why do you think in that way? Like why do you relate to dessert as something that is earned? And like what is it about those foods that make you feel like you have to like save up all year in order to deserve multiple servings of it? And so it goes back to again like that food neutral approach too, of understanding like, well, dessert is food in the same way that the main entree you just ate is food. So why, like, what are these like feelings and emotions that we've developed around those foods? So it's not like a super straightforward answer, but it's really getting clear on like just further understanding like, why have I told myself that I deserve this? What experiences have I had in the past? And this probably all feels really abstract to everyone because it is. It's complicated. Like we as humans, the way we coexist with food, it's something we do multiple times a day. Like it's complicated. There are layers to it. And so that's something when I work with someone one-on-one, like we are spending time drilling that down and peeling back the layers and really trying to understand that.
I think that's beautiful. I mean, you totally answered my question. I think a lot about how many holidays, especially as women growing up, we were kind of like fed that rhetoric. And as we know from like neuroplasticity, you know, the things that fire together wire together. So like how many holidays have we spent with the same belief system over and over? You know, that pathway is so ingrained. And I know the work that you do one-on-one with people is like taking a step back and being like, okay, can we create new thoughts and associations with food because this one is super ingrained? You know, can we create a
Yeah.
new neural pathway? So I think it's so beautiful. And that helps me this holiday season be like, what repetitive thoughts am I running on the background that I'm not even aware of? So
Yeah.
thank you.
I think one question that I had, you guys, and it's something we had talked about as well with root causes. A lot of people, especially in the fitness community, will give themselves permission only if they can work it off later. So you get into this mentality where January is the #1 month for people getting back into an exercise routine because they're like eating whatever they want, doing whatever they want during the holidays and not allowing themselves to do anything. And now they've got to burn it all off in January and they diet and they restrict and it's all going to go away. And it's, for me, it's always very interesting because during the holidays, I've noticed that a lot of the people I know in the fitness community actually like don't work out for 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. They're like just allowing themselves to completely let go. And then in January, they're going to fix it. And it's unhealthy the way that you're looking at it. So I find this very helpful tonight because it's another way of looking at it. Like it's neutral.
Yeah.
It's just food. It's just another day. It's, being with your family, it's community, it's focusing on, what feels good in your body and all
Hmm.
these unhealthy attachments I think we have with food. And we make it so much more than it is during these 6 weeks. We have 6 weeks to go until we get through.
Yeah. No,
I
that's I like that unhealthy attachment terminology because it's true. Like we like cling to these thought patterns, and sometimes it's like, well, why am I even clinging to this thought pattern? Is this serving me? Sort of thing. And that brings me to, I'll like share one last thing that can be really helpful, this concept of food habituation.
Ooh.
So the more that we expose ourselves to these foods that we have characteristically labeled as off limits for whatever reason, the less that food is going to feel so glamorous or so like incredible to the point where we do feel like it's something we deserve. I think the less like, or the more that we expose ourselves to something like dessert or just allow ourselves to have it, the less it becomes such a big deal. And such like there'll be days where you're like, I don't even want dessert, which might sound crazy to some of you if you've had this more tumultuous experience with food where you've told yourself like you can't have that, like you can't have that. And then the minute you have it, you just go crazy over it. It probably feels like you would never be able to be in a space where you're like, I don't want that. I could care less. But if you expose yourself to it readily, like it becomes way less infatuating. So that's the concept of food habituation.
I love it. Do we have any other questions? Did anybody email questions in?
Not that I can see over email. Skylar, this was so helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I feel like I can navigate next week with a lot of confidence.
Good. Yes.
And then just as a reminder to everyone, hey Garland, a reminder to everyone that Skylar, of course, looks at the food and nutrition portion of all of your protocols. So she is our expert for that and looking at the whole big picture, your stress, all your lab work, everything in conjunction with Maddie and really coming up with this beautiful recommendation. But if you want to dive deeper with her, you can do the one-to-one sessions.
Yes.
Which might be useful during the holidays.
Yes. We have a lot of fun in those sessions, I promise.
Garland, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you, Skylar, because I manage my diabetes with food and exercise. And the thing that you were bringing up is that I often restrict some of the food that I eat, even though it's not a part of my lifestyle to eat that food. And I should be able to have it. It's the narrative that I have in my mind that somehow I will set myself back, or that I will be judged while eating it by the people who know that I'm controlling my diabetes through food and exercise. And what you freed me to do tonight is to understand that diabetes is a look at behavioral food consumption. And I can have something once in a while and not worry about it, taking me off my track. So I have a different approach to walking into the holidays this year because of what you just did. And so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes, thank you. I've been freed. I appreciate that.
Oh, Skylar, you're amazing.
You are amazing, Skylar. That is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
That is beautiful. Yeah, it's already. Oh, go ahead. No.
I was just gonna say, if there's any question, you guys can always email us, hello@revhealth.com. You can go on our link. We've got it in Instagram to book one-to-one with Skylar. She is
Excellent.
adorable.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you for joining.
All right. Take care. All right. Good night.
All right. Good night. I'm going to stop recording, you guys. So if anybody didn't want to be on.